So, because I know a lot of us, we lead with fear, like we
Yes,
internalize nothing but
yes,
that implemented fear, and
yes,
I feel that a lot of it has to do with boundaries as well.
yes,
It's like when we're flexible in those boundaries, it's typically because of fear.
yes.
And trying to put that fear in the back seat, how do we go about that? Do we amplify the good in our lives and just kind of be like a repetitive, or
So,
how
so
do
I
we
think
do that?
I think for every person it'll be a little different. There's lots of techniques, if you will, but I think what's more important than technique is principle, right?
Mhm.
Now, let's look at the idea of fear. Before we address, before we remove fear, we actually find out what's fear for, right? Because fear is actually a valuable thing. All emotions, good or bad, as we would call them, are
Mhm.
actually valuable. They're giving you information. In order for your limbic system, the mammalian part of your brain that does the emotions, to have an emotion, I don't know if you know this, but other than sense of smell, your limbic system has no direct contact to the outside world. So it
Mhm.
only has the stories you tell it, right?
Right.
So that for fear to arise, you have a story of something dangerous is happening. That's it, right? I lose my job. That's dangerous. I'll get mugged. That's dangerous. I'll get a
Right.
disease. That's dangerous. These are all dangers, and fear is designed to get you to predict a danger so you can avoid it before it happens. Are you with me?
Correct. Yes.
Some dangers are worth paying attention to, right? You're
Mhm.
walking down the road with your shopping, and a friendly man says, "Let me help you with that." And you get this creepy feeling. You go, "Oh, I don't know about this," right? Listen to
Mhm.
that, right? Now you might be overcautious. You might have an internal prejudice that is incorrect, but it doesn't matter because your safety is at stake. You're better erring on the side of caution with a stranger. Now that's different than, let's say, working with a colleague at work where there's a lot more vetting going on and so on. Do you see what I'm trying to say here?
Mhm.
So where the risk is the highest, listening to fear is important. Having
Right.
said that, with that little slice of life put to one side, that's a very different kind of fear, right? Pretty much every other fear, the golden rule is ignore it. Just do it anyways, right?
Yeah.
My best work, my best discoveries, my best successes have come from doing things that initially made me sweat bullets with fear. Like, can I do this? That's
Yeah.
outrageous. Am I even? Oh, I don't know if I can do that, right? And
Mhm.
then instead of there's a famous story I really enjoyed of a there's an English wrestler who had in London who had the reputation of really hurting his opponents, right, really harming them. And there's a Scottish wrestler who challenged him, and so they had the date appointed for the match and so on. And so the night before the match, the Scottish wrestler gets on a train from, I don't know, Glasgow, whatever it was, down to London, and he's got to
Mhm.
change a few times in between, right? Anyways, at one of the big junctions before he gets into London, he's so obsessed with this guy's reputation, he's so terrified, he basically gets off the train and goes across the platform to the train right back to Glasgow and goes home, and then he sends a letter to the um, wrestler in London. You defeated me in Manchester or wherever the train stopped, right?
Mhm.
But it wasn't, of course, the wrestler to defeat him. He defeated himself, his own mind. Are you with
Yeah.
me?
Yes.
So when I heard that story, that gave me, actually, I'll give you another story which is very much very similar to that. When I was still training in hypnosis, right, and I was looking at my peers, the people directly above me, I admired because that's within reach, shall we say. There was one guy I was who was in one of the classes I was in, and he was amazing. His language was smooth, his tone was perfect. I loved working with him because I just felt amazing just working with him. It's like my problems were disappearing. It was amazing. I really, really cannot emphasize how good this guy was, right?
Mhm.
I assumed he was already a professional because of the skill I had experienced with him, right?
Right.
So then I asked him, "So how long have you been, doing hypnotherapy for?" And he goes like, "Oh, no, no, no. I'm not." He was a train driver. "Oh, no, no, no. I'm a train driver. I'm not ready for that stuff yet." And
Mhm.
he's been doing this for like 5 years, whatever it was. And it blew my mind. Someone this
Yeah.
good, who's been there doing this for so long, is still too afraid to think he can do this professionally. Are you with me?
Mhm. Yeah.
And those stories sat in the back of my mind that really created sort of this conclusion that unless there's a physical risk involved, right, that rope does not look safe enough to climb up, right? That's a
Right.
different concept, right? But if it's a project, if something that's going to improve my life, fear is no reason to not do it.
Right.
Just find out, right? I if there's risk, I can minimize the risk. I can figure out ways. of minimizing the risk, right? I can, if I want to do a new seminar, for example, I can not make big promises and just say, let me invite a few people to test it out first. Now I can get some experience. And from my experience, I can realize, oh, it's not so bad. I was on the right track. Let me fix these things. And now I can actually go to the market and charge money for this because I know it works now, right? There's ways of listening to the fear, what I need to fix within it, but never let that fear prevent you from doing the things you dream of in life, because you'll never be ready. Never, never, never. I've never been ready for anything I've done. Some things I failed at, I admit, and other things I failed at initially, and then I turned them around, right?
Yeah.
So that needs to be in the background before you even think about dealing with fear, because without that mindset, there's no point. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you're waiting until you're nice and comfortable before you do things, you'll never get there. It'll never happen. You'll be that train driver for the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to be a lawyer for the rest of my life. I wanted this life. And so
Yes.
I could risk leaving that law firm. I tell you, I have not sweated bullets like that. Even when I was mugged, I wasn't as afraid as that. Seriously, right?
Yeah.
I was shaking like a leaf, handing my letter into the senior partner. It was this. It wasn't like he was barking. He was a really nice guy. He was a little disappointed, which was actually a little worse in some ways. But do you see what I mean? It was terrifying. And then my first day out of work, I woke up. It's actually my birthday, which is a really bizarre coincidence. I woke up. It was a beautiful spring morning, and I was so relaxed. The birds. It was like a Disney movie. Birds were chirping outside, sunlight streaming on my face. I woke up so relaxed for the first time in years. And I loved it for like the first 10, 15 minutes. And then a little thought creeps up in the back of my mind saying, well, what now? Right? I have no client.
Right.
I don't know how to get clients. I don't know if I'm even good enough. I just literally just left, and I got terrified. And then for the next year or so, I had to do self-hypnosis every day, sometimes 4, 5, 6 times a day, to break down that fear, to allow me to actually get into the world and learn how to make a success of myself in that world. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Made tons of mistakes, but that's just part of the game. But
Right.
ultimately, but you see, the fear deconstructing tactics are only valuable when you've already made the determination. I won't let fear stop me. Because if you say, I'll start living my best life when I stop being afraid, I don't know anyone who's ever done that.
Right.
Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yes.
So if you still want, I can still talk about some strategies for dealing with fear directly. But I think what we just talked about is probably the most important foundation for dealing with fear. Because when fear is irrelevant, then it doesn't stick around. But if your
Right.
unconscious thinks that the fear is relevant, it's going to hang on to it.
Right. I
Does
like
that make
that.
sense?
Yes, it does.